we'll get started. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming here. It's the second year in a row that we'll be here as the Alternative Housing Summit to the Mayor's main housing summit. We see our role as a complementary one, but one that's very much important and one that's here to call attention to the affordable housing crisis in our city. We must act now. It's not a time to play definitional games with what affordable housing is. We all know what we mean. It's a common sense thing. We're talking about rental spaces for low-income people, people who are just feeling the pinch of the growth our city has experienced, of the soaring rental costs, and of the stagnant income levels of many of our working poor in our city. Since I put the call out for this year's Alternative Housing Summit, I've been receiving some emails of great concern to me and to our community. People are emailing me about bed bugs, about landlords who aren't responsive, about landlords who are illegally withholding damage deposits despite rentalsman rulings. New immigrants to Regina finding it almost impossible to find places in our city where they want to work and contribute and make a community. I've found people reporting from community-based organizations about emergency services like police dropping off people who are intoxicated because our wet detox center is full and there is simply nowhere else for those people to go. Hospitals not releasing patients who are well enough to be released because there is simply nowhere else for those people to go. Finally, last year's summit called attention to the city's definition, the very peculiar definition of affordable housing that pegged it at rental spaces that rent at average market or below. All of you who know any modicum of English can understand that affordable housing does not mean average rental housing in a city where a 2-bedroom apartment rents for over $1,000. Come on, this is not time for games, but time to take action. We're calling on the city to take affordable housing seriously and to have clear benchmarks about what that means. So, for instance, let's call for 100 new units a year for the next 4 years. Let's work with the province and the federal government to ensure this happens. Let's take responsibility for our city and our community. We have a number of speakers today that are going to help us focus in on this issue from their unique perspectives and insights. The first speaker I'd like to call to the mic is Peter Gilmer, a mainstay of our community. He's been doing work for many, many years on this issue. He comes from the Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry, and I'd like to welcome Peter now.
Thanks, Mark. And I just want to say that it's so great that 2 years in a row Mark has organized this event. He's shown tremendous leadership on housing issues in our community, and really he should be on the Mayor's Housing Committee. That's one good starting point. Article 11 of the United Nations Declaration on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights suggests that adequate housing is a basic human right that we all are entitled to. We believe that adequate housing is something that can't just be looked at as a policy issue, but that it is a basic human right. Saskatchewan and Canada have both committed themselves to this right under international law, and they need to be held accountable. Housing can't simply be viewed as another commodity to be bought or sold in the marketplace, because it is a basic human right and a basic human need. But we are here today because it's a basic need that it's not being met. I know at the Anti-Poverty Ministry, we've seen that the biggest increase in our casework since 2006 has been dealing in areas of rental coverage, rental availability, and rental conditions, as the lack of affordable housing and the ongoing crisis has continued to hurt low-income people in our community. Our Our ministry focuses on income security programs, working to make sure that people have the income that they need to meet their basic needs. But there isn't a day that goes by now where we don't have at least one phone call in regard to somebody saying, I can't afford my rent. I can't find a place to stay. My accommodations are not quality accommodations. They don't meet decent standards. That happens every single day. Behind all the statistics is tremendous human misery. We must consider what it means to have a truly comprehensive housing strategy for all of Regina's citizens. First of all, as Marc was saying, we need to ensure that we maintain the traditional definition of affordable housing, not exceeding 30% of household incomes. Housing cannot be considered affordable just because it's at or below market rent. Skyrocketing rents in recent years have meant that it is far beyond the means of many people that we work with. We believe that there needs to be a much higher priority given to social housing, housing geared to income. This should be a top priority for all levels of government. Provincially, we don't believe it's enough to just push some people out of social housing to move other people in. And we agree that a targeted commitment to 100 new truly affordable rental units as part of the housing strategy should be a key endeavor of this conference today. In the same way that trickle-down economics leads to growing economic inequality, trickle-down housing does not alleviate homelessness, and it does not resolve the housing crisis. Even before there was a problem in terms of availability, there was a big problem in Regina in regard to having way too many substandard, ill-maintained properties in the community. The present rental market has meant that low-income people are in an extremely vulnerable position when it comes to addressing rental conditions with their landlords because their options are so limited. There's a desperate need for either rental unit licensing and/or a rental unit inspection program to ensure explicit quality standards for all rental accommodations. We believe that those with wealth and power in our society are able to protect their own interests, generally speaking. But governments have a vital responsibility. Governments of all levels have a vital responsibility to protect those who cannot defend themselves, to protect the vulnerable.
Hear, hear.
So once again, I want to thank you all for coming out. I know all of you are doing really good work in the community. Keep it up. You are making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter Gilmer. Next up, we have Nic Olsen, who is a former employee of Carmichael Outreach. Please come on up, Nic.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks to everyone for coming today. Right now, the city and developers are upstairs patting themselves on the back for a year of inaction and bare minimums. They're talking about purportedly innovative housing starts that won't really even put a dent in the affordable housing crisis that exists in our city. Since the Housing Summit last year, which I attended with Carmichael, the city has been paying developers to build normal, everyday market rental units. Because of pressure from the community through a Roof Ready Regina project and events kind of like this, they have recently changed their subsidy program and now use the CMHC definition of affordable housing, that is 30% of an individual's income. So this past year, developers built more market rental units and sucked up as much of the municipal subsidy as they possibly could before the unsustainable, nonsensical program was inevitably changed. Housing starts were up, the vacancy rate went up, but more importantly, rental costs continue to soar, and that's what we're here kind of celebrating. Locally and provincially, no firm plan has been created to address homelessness when similar cities in this country have set up specific goals and measures to ensure the end of homelessness within 10 years, for example. Instead, the city has gone as far to subsidize and entirely rely on the market to do what is the government's job. The municipal government repeatedly claims that housing isn't their fiscal responsibility. However, this doesn't absolve the city from being a proactive player in ending homelessness. Several small steps could be made to keep developers accountable and to improve housing situation for the most marginalized in our city, such as requiring developers to build certain percentage of their units as affordable housing or requiring them to pay into an affordable housing account or fund. This would be a progressive step to ensure adequate amounts of affordable housing is created per year and to make a sustainable housing program run by the city. They could also form true partnerships with provincial government to align programs and funding. This is the logical step for the city to move forward. Create an action plan with solid, measured, and attainable goals, and affordable housing is a responsible thing for the city to do, with the help, of course, from the provincial and federal governments. In working with community, I've seen dozens of people living in substandard housing that they can still barely afford because of the costs of the city, rental costs of the city. And for many, the idea of living in a safe, healthy, and affordable place of their own is really just a pipe dream. It takes a responsible community and, more importantly, a responsible, just, and moral government to ensure that housing is accessible to all. Decisions of policymakers have not been made in the public interest, but rather in the interest of private developers and in the interest of garnering votes. Focusing on low-income seniors and single-parent families is incredibly important, but is often done to sway the public interest, not to truly cover the marginalized in our society. The municipal government has the opportunity to be a proactive player in developing policy to ensure that adequate amounts of affordable housing is developed in our community, and they have the responsibility to partner with all levels of government to do so. Today, we call on the city to develop a proactive, concrete plan to improve housing for everyone and not just everyone who can pay for it. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Next up, giving us a student perspective on the housing issue, Nadia Akbar-Kamal from the Regina Public Interest Research Group. Thanks, Nadia.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Nadia Akbar-Kamal from University of Regina, and we had some great speakers, so you guys got a little bit of idea like why we're here today and what we're doing. Today I'm gonna give you a little bit of perspective from students. When my family and I were moving from back home to Canada, the first thing that everybody would mention was how great this country is gonna be, which no doubt some aspects, yes it is. And one idea that kept coming was the free education. Let me tell you, it's not free. For one class, I pay $670 or even like sometimes more depending if it's online courses, if there's other fees related to that. And international students almost pay double or triple the amount of the tuition that we pay. So let me tell you that education is not free, first of all. And while paying for tuition and be able to afford housing, it's very difficult for students. I have friends that live in houses that have molds, but they can't do much about it just because they do not have enough money to afford the rent. Sometimes it just feels that the society is out there to make us fail in life, so please do not let us fail. And that's all I have to say. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think every individual student's success is a success of the community, and every individual student's failure is a failure of our community. Next up, we have Mona Hill. She's a social worker and the former president of Amnesty-Regina. Thanks, Mona.
Thanks, Mark. The presentation I want to give today is more of a storytelling. I work in an adult education program. I've worked with young people, young adults, for many years who are trying to make their lives better. And I'm going to tell you some of their stories as well as interject with some of my opinions and some facts about what I've come across. These are going to be true life stories. In the program that I teach in, one of the things I do is I teach Toastmasters public speaking so that when they go for a job interview, they can do a great job and just snag that job. And one of the things about Toastmasters is coming up with something as a catcher, right at the beginning of your speech. My catcher today is, what's the connection between housing and being told by your income assistance worker to get a job or get some training or you're going to be cut off? What is that connection? Based on the work that I've been engaged in, the bird's eye view I'm going to give you of some of the unhealthy, inadequate situations caused by our dire lack of affordable housing in Saskatchewan and particularly in Regina is going like this. First of all, for years now, government has been subsidizing programs to assist people to upgrade their education, training in order to obtain marketable employment skills. However, without healthy, affordable housing, many do not finish those programs. And they don't become responsible taxpayers through no fault of their own. Retention rates in programming in this province are sometimes pretty dismal. When we're talking about employment programs, education programs outside of the norm of university, even in first-year university, I've discovered that retention rates are terrible. A lot of that has to do with lack of healthy, affordable housing. I currently work with a young mother of 3 who's looking forward to independence and freedom from the oppressive situation she's been living in for the past 6 years due to lack of inadequate income and training. And I asked her yesterday, what would you like me to pass on to this audience? She replied thoughtfully, I've spent 6 years trying to find a decent home to raise my children so that I can afford to and not worry about mold in the basement and my children getting sick and me having to stay home from classes so I don't have to miss my education. I'm sick and tired of falling plaster. I'm sick and tired of broken plumbing and doors and windows that don't allow the snow and the cold to get in when it's minus 30 with a minus 50 wind chill. And this is not just her. This is so many young people that are trying to move ahead that I have been working with for years now. I've been in those homes, by the way. I've seen the mildew. The following are more first-hand experiences of the many young people I've worked with over the years, and these experiences have prevented them from achieving economic security and affordable, healthy housing. So first of all, time spent searching for affordable housing. It takes away from that time. Do you know how, some of you know, but I don't think many of you know how exhausting it is to be looking for housing that you can take your children to, that you can be healthy and safe in, and that you're not living under circumstances where the other people you're having to couch surf in their living room are living in unhealthy circumstances. I'm going to address that a bit later. There is a cyclical catch-22 when you're in classes for training, for upgrading education, that you can't seem to break because of lack of affordable, healthy housing. Number 2, too many women in particular are forced to live in a state of domestic violence because they can't leave that housing. They have nowhere else to go that they can afford. They can't get their children out. And by the way, talking to your welfare worker, your social assistance worker, you may get a lot of sympathy, but that may be all you get. Overcrowding of homes leads to evictions because now you've got too many people in the home and the landlord is saying, I'm sorry, you're all going to have to go. What's happening here? Now we've got not just 3 people homeless, we've got 6 or 7 or 8 people homeless. Lack of affordable housing causes children to miss school and dropout rates in high school. The young people I hire for my program often tell me in my interviews with them that they left because they had nowhere to live, that they left high school because their families were moving constantly because they couldn't afford the rent or there was mold in the house and there was sickness. You can't keep moving your children around the city and expect them to not suffer emotionally and physically even. Mentally, constant moving of your children is a huge issue for retention rates in elementary schools, in high schools. I've hired people who have taken their kids out of school so often the kids just don't, there's no interest anymore. Nothing the teachers can do. Yesterday I did a phone survey. I called up the subsidized housing corporations in Regina. Those were not including specialized housing for people with disability or special needs. There's currently not available, far too many low-income, sorry, I'm lost. I included minimum wage earners in this, by the way. On an average, and these are the places I called, there's 4 or 5 of them in here. On average, it's anywhere from, if you're in dire straits, maybe 2 months to find subsidized housing. But for the most part, it's at least a year to 2 years, and one place I called has 800 applications for affordable, safe, healthy housing, and they only have 300 units. Mr. Mayor, are you hearing this? This fact pushes those who are waiting to live in substandard, unhealthy, far too expensive situations with little left over for the rest of their living expenses. So what other situations are included in this? A few examples are sleeping on a couch with 2 children on the floor. How How does one study for exams when you're in first year university or in your grade 12 upgrading? Or rise early enough to attend training when living on someone else's home where there's an unhealthy lifestyle and everybody's been up, I don't know, doing what all night and you can't get any sleep? How does a parent dress for success? Because that's what we demand of our young people, and get out there and get a decent job, when every morning they have to pull a pile of clothes off the floor at the end of the couch they sleep on. How does a parent prepare healthy meals for their children when they're living in a 2-bedroom home with often 6 or more people in the same house, and that home doesn't belong to them? Where do they store their own food, if they have enough to buy it? How can a person afford a cell phone to call an employer, a potential employer, when paying up to, and more often than not, over 50% of income on housing? How can one afford even a bus pass to get to training or work when nearly over 50% of training allowances or social assistance checks or minimum wages are used for housing? Someone mentioned, I think it was you, Peter, the declaration and the fact that housing is a basic right. And because of the work that I've done and still work on in human rights, I'm going to quote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 25. Everyone has a right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, housing, and medical care, and necessarily social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond their control. Too often, our young people are failing at attempts to become self-sufficient and become taxpayers because of issues beyond their control. Article 23 states everyone has the right to work and to freedom, a free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protect against unemployment. I'm going to end with, if we want to empower people to earn enough money to become responsible, employable taxpayers, they must have healthy, affordable housing during those transition periods, after those transition periods from education and training, in order to earn regular wages. We can't keep building new homes for non-existent home buyers who are not demanding them when so many capable, intelligent, potential tax-paying citizens are living in squalor, in unhealthy, substandard, overcrowded conditions without the support of that social safety net called affordable housing and rent controls that we have been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. As someone who works in education, I can tell you with certainty that poverty is the biggest learning difficulty out there. Next up, we have Angelica Barth from the Queen City Tenants Association. Thanks, Angelica.
Hi. Hello, Angelica Barth from the Queen City Tenants Association. Our focus is renters and their rights and responsibilities, and working toward a better cooperative relationship between landlords and tenants. And we do that in part by education, so this would be one of those opportunities. I've just learned today in the summit upstairs going on there that a big part of affordable housing in Regina is a lack of coordination between bylaws and housing regulations. And this is after 1 year since this last summit, and how many years of unaffordability. So that's something I think we need to work on further in order to move toward affordable housing. It sounds as though some developers want to have affordable housing, but these rules are not in the favor, such as so simple things as a driveway being in the wrong place or not being accommodating. So simple things like rules still need to be changed. So that's part of what the Queen City Tenant Association would want to contribute to changing. And other things such as don't want to say rent control, that's a very bad word, but regulations such as if the rent goes up, it shall be related to the cost of regular upkeep and maintenance instead of just going up because the market will allow. That too will help affordable housing. And we still have a lot of work to do on helping tenants with landlord issues. I'm presently in the midst of helping a tenant who had a landlord who outright lied at the tenancy hearing I attended with this tenant. And so we need to do more work on that. There's a lot more education to do, so we hope to do that. And that's about all I have to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Angelica. Peter, I'm not sure, I haven't checked the Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry's constitution, but am I on the Regina Housing Commission now? Did you do that? Awesome, I can't wait till I go to the meetings. Next up we have Tyler Gray from Carmichael Outreach to tell us about the first-hand things he sees every day.
First of all, just thanks everyone for coming out. I think the purpose of this event for me is to supplement the discussions that are happening upstairs. If there's one thing that I've learned in the year and a half that I've been working in housing in Regina, it's that too often housing gets separated into a conversation about the market and the folks that exist outside of the market. And what ends up happening is you end up having a lot of conversation around people that are portions of the community that we forget that they're the members of our own community. And that's a lot of the people's experience that we work with at Carmichael Outreach on a day-to-day basis. Probably the biggest thing that I've learned from the folks that I deal with, helping them with housing over the course of this year and a half, has been this. Vulnerability extends far beyond your financial means. The individuals that we work with are very often found to be in substandard housing. We've had folks over the course of this year that have had flooded basements for 3 months with no cleanup. We've had people who've lived in houses that have bed bug infestations, mice, rats, you name it, and it's there. And their vulnerability is something that they experience every day, not just in the dollars that are in their pockets, but in the doors that close in their homes when they go to their places at night, if they're fortunate enough to have one. I would echo the calls that Angelica made. We're having conversations upstairs right now about there being these clashes between the official community plan and current zoning regulations and bylaw standards and building standards. And those things need to change. In order for the market to truly be a contributor to bringing solutions to the affordable housing crisis that exists in Regina, the OCP needs to line up with regulations so that developers are able to produce small self-contained units, varying levels of housing, diversity of stock, so that we can truly see affordability come to those that need it most, not just the homeowners and the renters that are in the high and the mid-market, but for the folks that are part of the low and out-of-market groups that we deal with on a daily basis. Assistance rates in this province have lagged behind for far too long. I recognize that that is not a municipal issue, but it's something that needs to change. If an individual is granted $459 base level rental allowance, their ability to find housing in the city of Regina goes from negligible at best due to other factors to non-existent. And if you're trying to find somebody a place for $459, if there isn't a rental house that's available for a rooming house, and that landlord doesn't happen to deny renting to people on social assistance or refuse the letter of guarantee, you might luck out and find somebody a place to live. Otherwise, it's a constant battle, and it's a constant segregation of the individuals that come into our building to about a 4-block radius between the Marion Center, Souls Harbor, Salvation Army, Detox, and the hospital. And it's a population that goes invisible, unrecognized in policy, and they go invisible and unrecognized by the community that they're a part of, and those things need to change. The reality of the numbers, both federally, provincially, and locally, indicate that we spend twice as much, if not more, money on emergency services than we would spend if we actually just provided housing for people. What a lack of strategic investment that signifies in our communities, that we would spend $7 billion as a country on emergency services when we could spend $3.5 billion on housing and eradicate those cost expenditures. It's something that we just need to start looking long term. We need to stop evaluating our decisions from a governmental perspective on what wins votes and start focusing them on what builds healthy communities. outside of the cost savings of the things that can happen when you house individuals, what gets missed most when we talk about the individuals that we deal with at Carmichael Outreach is their humanity and their dignity. It's not just about how many dollars